Welcome to this Advanced English Vocabulary Masterclass. Today you will learn the vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation you need to reach the C1, C2 level. This masterclass will help you sound fluent, natural, and confident when you're in a job interview, giving a presentation, or taking your IELTS. Of course, I'm Jennifer from JForrest English. Now let's start the masterclass. Let's review conundrum. Do you know this noun? Conundrum, conundrum. This is a confusing and difficult problem or question. Now remember, you can use all these words in both writing and speaking. So let me first share some examples for writing and then for speaking. This presents a conundrum. This is a noun, so you need an article. A conundrum for policymakers trying to balance economic growth with environmental sustainability. So remember, a confusing or difficult situation. You can speak of it as the conundrum. It's a unique one. The conundrum of rising tuition fees versus access to education remains unresolved in many countries. Or in speaking, you can say, choosing between studying abroad and staying in my country was a real conundrum for me. So you can use real to intensify it. Or you can use the collocation I often face the conundrum of how to balance my studies and part-time work. Let's review undoubtedly, undoubtedly, undoubtedly. This is an adverb. It means without doubt, or you can think of it as certainly or clearly true. You can use this to start your sentence. Undoubtedly, technology has transformed the way we communicate. I'm sure you would agree with that. Or climate change is undoubtedly one of the greatest challenges of our time. So notice here it comes after the verb to be. Or that was undoubtedly the most difficult project I've ever managed. Or how about this one? She is undoubtedly the best teacher I've ever had. Hopefully you're thinking that right now with my lessons and me as your teacher. So if you're thinking that, put that's right, put that's right in the comments. And don't worry about taking notes. I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Let's review tendency. Tendency. This is a likelihood to behave in a certain way or to happen regularly. For example, there is a growing tendency. So a tendency and then growing describes it. A growing tendency for people to shop online rather than in physical stores. It's happening more often as a routine event. Young adults show a tendency. A tendency is a noun, so you need a verb. You can use show a tendency to delay marriage and parenthood. Again, useful to talk about trends. I have a tendency to overthink things before making a decision. Or my brother has a tendency, so notice the verb have. My brother has a tendency to leave things until the last minute. It's a routine for him. How about fluctuate? Notice that pronunciation, fluctuate, fluctuate. This means to rise and fall irregularly or to vary over time. You could say the price of oil tends to fluctuate due to global demand and supply, or unemployment rates can fluctuate depending on economic conditions. My mood always fluctuates. It's a verb, so notice I added that as because it fluctuates during exam season. Up and down, positive, negative, happy, sad. The weather here fluctuates between hot and cold throughout the year. How about albeit? Albeit, albeit. This means although or even though. So you can say the solution was effective, albeit expensive. So we have a positive and then a negative, expensive, albeit expensive. The campaign succeeded, albeit with limited resources. I enjoyed the movie, albeit it was a bit too long, so you can still use this in an everyday context. It does sound more formal. The weather was nice, albeit slightly cold for my taste. Underscore, underscore. This means to emphasize or highlight the importance of something. The report underscored, you need to conjugate that verb. The report underscored the need for urgent climate action. It highlighted it. These findings underscore, in the present simple, the value of early childhood education. Or, I want to underscore, I want to highlight, to emphasize. I want to underscore how much this opportunity means to me. Or my father always underscored the importance of a clean room. Facilitate, facilitate. This is a must-know formal verb. It means to make an action or process easier or more efficient. You can say technology can facilitate faster communication between remote teams. It makes it easier, or it makes it happen. Governments must facilitate investment in public infrastructure. You can say online tools really facilitate learning for students like me. That sounds formal and professional. My university tries to facilitate student exchange programs. They try to make them happen or happen easier, faster. Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson. How about feasible? Feasible. This means possible, practical, and likely to succeed. Solar energy is a feasible alternative. So we have an alternative, and then feasible is the adjective, a feasible alternative to fossil fuels. Building more public housing is a feasible way. Again, a feasible way to reduce homelessness. Or, I think it is feasible, to be feasible, to work part-time while studying. Starting my own business someday feels feasible, albeit challenging. Albeit challenging. How about mitigate? Mitigate. This means to make something less severe, harmful, or painful. Policies are needed to mitigate climate change. So you mitigate something. Planting more trees can help mitigate something, urban air pollution. Or you can say to mitigate stress. Notice I'm starting with the infinitive, which is a purpose clause, in order to. To mitigate stress, I exercise every morning. Or drinking water, a gerund statement. Drinking water helps mitigate the effects of jet lag for me. Let's review paramount. Paramount. This means more important than anything else, or of greatest importance. Public safety should be of paramount concern, of the most important concern, above every other concern, of paramount concern. Education is paramount, so to be paramount to a country's long-term success. Or you can say health is paramount to me. It sounds more advanced than saying health is important to me. Health is paramount to me. So I always make time to work out. It's paramount, again, to be paramount, it's paramount that I stay focused before my exams. Let's review prevalent. Prevalent. This means widespread or commonly occurring. Obesity is becoming increasingly prevalent. So you can have to be or to become to show that process is becoming increasingly prevalent. So more and more prevalent. Or you could say a prevalent belief is that success comes only from hard work. You can say internet scams are quite prevalent. these days. So to be prevalent, and then quite intensifies it, are quite prevalent these days. That style of music is especially prevalent among young people. So again, to be prevalent. Let's review robust, robust, robust. This means strong and effective in all conditions or situations. This often describes the economy. A robust economy can withstand global financial shocks. The study uses a robust methodology. So here it's describing methodology, a robust methodology to ensure accuracy. Or you might say, I prefer a robust workout routine that challenges me. And you can say, the laptop I bought is extremely robust and durable. So it absolutely describes everyday objects like a laptop or a phone. Let's review allocate. I've already used this in example sentences. It's extremely important to know in a more formal context. To allocate. This means to distribute resources or duties for a particular purpose. Government should allocate more funds to education and healthcare. So allocate should contribute or disperse that resource. The company allocated a budget specifically for marketing this year. So they have all their money and then they take a part and allocate it to a specific purpose, marketing. Or you can say, I try to allocate enough time each day for studying English. Hopefully you say that. Or my manager allocated different tasks to each team member. So it's often used to describe distribution of work. You can think of that as tasks or projects. Let's review compulsory. Compulsory. This means required by law or rule. So you can think of it as mandatory. Education is compulsory for children up to age 16 in many countries. It's a requirement by law or rule. Wearing seatbelts should be compulsory for all passengers. It should be a law. In my school, uniforms were compulsory. So you can use this to talk about things you were required to do as a child or even now as an adult. Physical education used to be a compulsory subject. If it's a compulsory subject, it's an alternative word to mandatory, not an option. It's compulsory. Let's review scarce. Scarce. This means in short supply, so there's not enough to meet demand. Clean water is becoming scarce in some regions. So this is often used to talk about resources. Housing in urban areas is often scarce and expensive, so to be. During the pandemic, masks were scarce. This is in the past and our subject is masks, so it needs to match the plural subject. Jobs in my field are scarce. So again, jobs is plural. They are scarce, to be scarce, especially for beginners. Let's review predominantly. Predominantly. This is an alternative to mainly or for the most part, and it sounds more formal. The region is predominantly agricultural. So the region is mostly agricultural. This approach is predominantly used. So is used and then predominantly tells you how. The approach is predominantly used in developed countries. Or you can say my neighborhood is predominantly residential. So you can use this to describe situations in your daily routine. Even casual situations like I predominantly listen to rock music, but I like pop too. So you can use this to talk about your preferences. Let's review enable. Enable, I've already used this in examples as well. It's so important to use this formal verb in situations like your IELTS. This means to make it possible for something to happen or be done. The new policy will enable more students to access education. So to enable something. Technology enables, we have technology it, so we need to add that S in the present simple. Technology enables companies to do something, so you need your infinitive, to work more efficiently. Or studying online enabled me to work at the same time, so you can enable someone to do something. A second job enabled my parents, someone, to do, the infinitive, to pay for my education. It's how it happened. Let's review consequently. Consequently. This is an alternative to as a result or therefore. Many factories closed, and consequently, as a result, therefore, unemployment rose. So unemployment rose because the factories closed. Prices increased, consequently, fewer people could afford homes. It sounds more formal than saying fewer people could afford homes because. I didn't prepare well. Well, what's the result? Consequently, I failed the test. Or he overslept, and what was the result? And consequently, missed his flight. Let's review moreover. Moreover. This means in addition or besides. It sounds more formal. The plan is expensive. Moreover, it lacks public support. So when you want to add an additional point. Now, if you already had a full statement and you want to provide another one, you can start your sentence with moreover. Moreover, renewable energy reduces long-term environmental costs. So this assumes you already said something about renewable energy. In a more everyday context, you can say, I enjoy cooking. Moreover, it helps me relax. So you're just providing another benefit. She's a good student. Moreover, she volunteers every weekend. So we can make two simple statements sound way more advanced by connecting them together. Let's review nowadays. Nowadays. This means at the present time, and it's in contrast to the past. Pay attention to the sentence structure. You can start your sentence nowadays, and there's always an S. Nowadays, people rely heavily on AI. This sounds like it's happening now, but it wasn't happening in the past. You can also have a subject nowadays, verb. Many people nowadays choose to live abroad. Again, you're making a contrast to the past. I use ChatGPT instead of Google nowadays. It's also possible to put it at the end. Keep in mind, it sounds slightly more casual at the end of a statement. So in your spoken exam, if you're in the more casual part, you can absolutely put it at the end, but for more formal writing, I recommend at the beginning. Nowadays, it's common to work remotely. And remember, you're making a contrast to the past. Amazing job, already sounding more advanced. Let's keep going and you'll learn Band 9 IELTS answers. And this is specific to a must-know IELTS topic, your hometown. Of course, you can also use this vocabulary outside of your language exam to sound advanced. Let's start with vocabulary you need to describe city areas. First, you need to know what a neighborhood is. This is a small area within a city or town where people live close to each other. So just think of a neighborhood as you have a large area and then you have a smaller area. That's a neighborhood. You could say, I live in a quiet neighborhood. So add adjectives. That will help you sound more advanced. I live in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knows each other by name. Or you could say, there are a lot of young families in my neighborhood. So you can use that possessive pronoun, my neighborhood. You need to know a residential area. This is used to describe an area with mainly homes, but not businesses. So you can say, I live in a residential area that has plenty of trees and parks. So the interviewer knows that you live in an area with mainly homes, not businesses. Or start with a gerund statement to sound very advanced and say, living in a residential area is peaceful, but you depend on a car. So having that contrast as well, a positive and a negative, will help you sound very advanced. Now, the opposite of a residential area is an industrial area. This describes an area with factories or large businesses. You might say, my neighborhood borders an industrial area, so it can be quite noisy during the day. So notice the verb to border. This means to be next to something or to share an edge or boundary with it. You could say this neighborhood used to be mainly industrial, but is being converted into a residential area, which is happening in many cities. You need to know what a suburb is. This is a residential neighborhood on the outer edge of the main city. So it's a neighborhood, but just think it's on the outer edge of a city. So it's usually quite far. If someone says they live in the suburbs, you might say, my family recently moved to the suburbs, because it's more affordable. And native speakers will casually call it the burbs, the burbs. This is a casual abbreviation used in written or spoken English. You might say, we just bought a house in a newly developed suburb. A newly developed, an adverb and an adjective to describe the suburb. Let's talk about a rural area. Rural area. This is in the countryside, so it's far away from cities or towns. You might say, I was raised in a rural area surrounded by farms. Or you can say, I live in the country on a 10-acre property. So native speakers, we commonly use the country to represent a rural area. We use them interchangeably. Of course, you probably know downtown. This is the main business and commercial area of a city. You can also call it the city center, but in North America, we generally call it downtown. Maybe you make a hypothetical statement and say, if I didn't have kids, I definitely live downtown. Or you can say, I live in the suburbs, but I commute to downtown for work. Do you know what the outskirts are? This is the outer part of a town or a city. You can say they're building a huge shopping center on the outskirts. So notice the preposition on, and you need the article the. And outskirts has an S on it, is plural, on the outskirts. Or you can say the airport is located on the outskirts, the outer edge of the city. Let's review metropolitan. This is used to describe big, busy city areas with lots of people and buildings. You might say, I moved from a small rural town to a large metropolitan city. Or again, use that gerund statement. Living in a metropolitan area gives you more job options. Those are the main city areas, so let's describe the types of dwellings. Perhaps you live in a detached home. A detached home. This is a standalone house that doesn't share any walls with another home. So you can say, I grew up in a detached house with a big backyard. Of course, you don't have to say detached, but it just gives more information and it makes it more descriptive. You can compare this to a semi-detached house. So this is a house that shares one wall with another house. So you can say, I live in a semi-detached house in the suburbs. Native speakers also refer to this as a side-by-side. So if you ever hear, I live in a side-by-side, that's a semi-detached house. One style of house that's very common in North America is a row house or a townhouse. So this is a group of homes in a continuous row, each sharing walls on both sides. You might say, I used to live in a row house or a townhouse close to downtown. Now, generally, native speakers use them interchangeably, but technically a townhouse is a style of row house that's very tall and narrow, usually 2 to 3 floors. But most modern row houses are townhouses in North America. Of course, you know what an apartment is. This is a unit inside a larger residential building, but it's important to know that you rent this unit. So you might say, I've been living in an apartment downtown for the last 5 years. So here, downtown describes where the apartment is. And compare this to a condominium. Native speakers almost always refer to this as a condo. This is an apartment that you own rather than rent. So you can say, I recently bought a condo downtown that has a large gym and a rooftop terrace. And using the word condo doesn't sound like slang. It sounds like what a native speaker would use. Let's compare this to a high-rise. Of course, this is a very tall building with many floors, and it's usually used for apartments, condos, or offices. So you could talk about how you work in a high-rise. Or you could say, I recently bought a high-rise condo. So notice high-rise is the adjective. It comes before the word condo. Downtown, that's the location, that has a large gym and a rooftop terrace. Now, you could also use the word skyscraper. This is an extremely tall building, so taller than a high-rise. Now let's review some vocabulary to describe the layout of your hometown. You might talk about a historic district. This is an older part of a town with buildings that have historical value. You could say, I bought a condo in a historic district, so renovations have been very slow because there are a lot of rules and regulations around renovating historic buildings. Or you can say, most of the museums in my city are in the historic district. You'll probably talk about the public transportation system. So this is buses, trains, subways, and other transportation options available to the public. You might say, unfortunately, my city has a very outdated transportation system. So outdated is the adjective. It means not modern. Or you can say, thankfully, my city has a modern and reliable public transportation system. And then you can go on and describe your experience with it. Green space is an important concept, more and more important. This is land reserved for parks, gardens, or natural areas. So you might say, I'm lucky to have a lot of green space in my city. So notice we generally use this as a singular concept. You could say the government is trying to create more green space downtown. So simply allocate land for parks or natural purposes. Do you know what amenities are? These are useful services and facilities that make life easier. So shops, schools, hospitals, gyms, all of these are amenities. You can say we moved to a neighborhood with more amenities, and then you can describe what those amenities are. Or you can say, I live in a rural area that lacks basic amenities. I have to drive 15 minutes just to get milk. So providing a specific example is a great way to sound more advanced. Let's talk about infrastructure. This is basic systems that support an area. So think of roads, electricity, water, internet. That's infrastructure. You can say the infrastructure, notice the infrastructure in my hometown has improved a lot recently. And we use this as a singular concept to describe all infrastructure. Let's review waterfront because this is a sought after area, an area that many people want. This is an area that is along water. Any type of water, whether it's the ocean, a small river, or even a pond, you can say it's waterfront. So you can say, my parents just bought a waterfront condo, or whatever type of home, a waterfront detached home. So waterfront comes before the type of home to describe it. You can say downtown is always bustling because of its waterfront. So downtown is along the water. That would be quite beautiful. So notice I used to be bustling. Notice that T is silent. Bustling, bustling. This means to be very busy, full of activity. So it's a great adjective to use. Of course, you probably know what a tourist attraction is. This is a place that many visitors go to see. You can say our main tourist attraction is, and then whatever it is, the old castle, for example. Or you can say the waterfall is a popular tourist attraction in this region, this area, this suburb, whatever type of vocabulary you want to use. Now compare this to the word touristy. Do you know what this means? Touristy. Well, this is used to describe places that are full of tourists or designed mainly for tourists. But keep in mind, this sounds negative. Whenever I'm in a new city, honestly, I try to avoid touristy areas. Maybe someone says downtown has become too touristy, or the restaurants along the river are touristy. Well, to me, that sounds like the quality of the food is not very good, is going to be very busy, and it will be very expensive. Touristy. When describing your hometown, you'll probably talk about monuments. So this is a statue or structure built to honor a person or event. You can say there's a monument in the main square for soldiers who died in the war. So it's to represent them, to honor them. Or you can say they built a new monument to celebrate the city's 100th anniversary. So again, use adjectives and adverbs to sound more advanced. Let's talk about people and community. So of course, locals. These are people who live in a particular place. So you can say the locals, the because they're specific to that place, and plural because it represents all of them. The locals in my town are very friendly to visitors. Or as a child, I knew almost all the locals on our street. You can use the adjective tight-knit. Tight-knit, knit. This is a community where people have a strong, close relationship. So you can say, I grew up in a tight-knit community. So tight-knit is the adjective that describes community, where everybody knew each other. Or you can say, everyone in my neighborhood is tight-knit, so very close. You can use multicultural. This means having many different cultural or ethnic groups. You can say my neighborhood is very multicultural with people from all over the world. Or again, use a gerund statement. Growing up in a multicultural environment taught me to be open-minded. You can use welcoming. This means friendly and open to new people. People in my hometown are very welcoming to newcomers. The community center has a very welcoming atmosphere. So welcoming is the adjective that describes atmosphere. Perhaps you can talk about a working class neighborhood. This is an area where most people have lower paid or manual jobs. I live in a working class neighborhood with mainly small houses. Compare this to a middle class neighborhood. This is an area where most people have stable, well-paid jobs and comfortable homes. My parents moved to a middle-class neighborhood when I was young. Or you might talk about the aging population. So this is an area with mainly elderly people. You can say my hometown has an aging population because most young people move to the city for work. You can talk about commuters. These are people who travel daily or regularly between home and work or school. You can say it's not easy being a commuter. So this is a noun, a commuter, a person who commutes. A commuter when you live on the outskirts. Remember that? On the outskirts. Now let's talk about lifestyle. You might talk about the cost of living. This is the amount of money needed to pay for basic expenses. And notice you use the article the cost of living. Those are the exact words you need. The cost of living in my city is quite high, which means it's expensive to live there. Or you can say we moved to the suburbs because the cost of living is lower. So it's less expensive to live there. Or you can say many people in my hometown are struggling with the increasing or the rising cost of living. So the cost of living, and then you use increasing or rising to describe it. How about hectic? hectic. This means very busy and full of activity. And it sounds negative because it's often stressful. So you can say living downtown, the gerund statement, living downtown can be quite hectic, especially on weekends. And then you can describe all the activities that take place that make it hectic. Or you can say, I moved to the countryside. Remember, that's a rural area. You could also just say, I moved to the country because the pace of city life was too hectic for me. Of course, you can use safe. This means not dangerous and with low crime and few risks. Parents like this area because it's safe for children. You can describe it as vibrant. This means full of energy, life, and activity, but it sounds positive compared to hectic, which sound negative. You can say, my city has a vibrant nightlife. Now you could describe your area as sleepy. So this isn't describing a person, it's describing an area, but think of it as a quiet area with little activity. So it's an alternative to saying boring, but it's more common to use sleepy in this context. So you can say many people complain that this city is too sleepy. There's not a lot to do, it's boring. Or you can say, after living downtown for years, I'm enjoying my sleepy rural area. So sleepy generally sounds negative, but you can use it in a contrasting way to show that you're enjoying the quiet pace of life. How about congested? This means too full of people or vehicles. So you can use this as a replacement to busy to sound more advanced, busy or crowded. You can say the main roads are extremely congested during rush hour. So again, a replacement to busy or crowded. Or you can say, we only have one good cafe in my area, so it can get very congested in the morning. Sounds more advanced than saying busy or crowded. Now, hopefully you don't describe your area as run down. This describes buildings or areas that look old, damaged, or not well cared for. And you can use this to describe a person as well. You can say, unfortunately, some parts of my city have become quite run down. So you can isolate a certain area of your hometown and describe it as run down, and maybe provide some examples or the reason why. Or you can say, our neighborhood was becoming run down, so the locals organized a fundraiser to spruce things up. To spruce up. This means to make something look cleaner, nicer, or more attractive. And you can use that with people as well. Let's review up and coming. This is a place that is developing quickly and becoming more attractive. So it's in progress. If you use up and coming, it's in progress. You can say, my neighborhood was quite sleepy when I first moved here, but now it's up and coming. So more buildings, more cafes, more shops, more people, more energy. Or you can say, I live in an up and coming area with lots of new stores and restaurants. And finally, gentrification. This is when a poor area becomes richer and original residents are often forced out. But it's a very common thing taking place now with our growing population. So it's quite common to describe this. You can say, I lived in this neighborhood through gentrification. So you were there when it was the original small houses, but then they started tearing those down and building more expensive houses, condos even, and more affluent people moved in. Or you can say, many locals are moving out because gentrification has increased the cost of living. Wow, you have already learned so much. One great way to sound more advanced is by adding adjectives and adverbs to your speech. Now you'll learn advanced adjectives followed by a quiz. Ubiquitous. Ubiquitous. This means present, found, or appearing everywhere. For example, smartphones are ubiquitous devices. They're found everywhere. They're found in every home, every office. So we can say smartphones are ubiquitous devices in every home and office. Paramount. Paramount. When something is paramount, it means it's more important than anything else. In emergency situations, the safety of the passengers is paramount to the airline crew. So you know the safety of the passengers is important to the airline crew, but by including the adjective paramount, you know it's more important than anything else. So the safety of the passengers is more important than protecting the actual airplane. The safety of the passengers is paramount. Vast, vast. This means a very great extent or quantity. So when I hear vast, I know that the extent is very great. For example, the Sahara Desert is a vast expanse of sand dunes. So of course I know there are sand dunes in the desert. I know there are many sand dunes. But when I hear vast, the image I have in my mind all of a sudden changes, and I see sand dune after sand dune after sand dune because it's vast. Profound, profound. This means having deep insight or understanding. For example, the professor's lecture on quantum mechanics was profound. By using this adjective, I understand that the person saying this learned a lot of very deep insights or now has a very deep understanding of the topic because it was profound. Pervasive, pervasive. This means spreading widely throughout a group or an area. Remember, we talked about how smartphones are ubiquitous. They appear everywhere. Well, as a result, we can say that social media is a pervasive part of modern society. Because smartphones are ubiquitous and social media, like the JForrest English YouTube channel, is now everywhere as well. So it's pervasive. It is spread widely and spread quickly within society. Inherent. Inherent. This means existing in something as a permanent or inseparable quality or element. For example, cats have an inherent ability to land on their feet when they fall. Have you heard that before? That when a cat falls, it always lands on its feet. Well, this is an inherent quality. It's permanent within the cat. It's not separable from the cat. The cat didn't learn how to do this. It's just an inherent quality. Inquisitive. Inquisitive. This means showing a strong curiosity or willingness to learn. For example, my daughter was very inquisitive when we were at the museum. Generally, someone displays being inquisitive by asking a lot of questions. So if you're at the museum with a young child or even an adult, and they ask a lot of questions about what they're seeing. They could also be inquisitive by wanting to read all of the signs and the posters and the information about the objects that they're looking at the museum. In my opinion, being inquisitive is a very beneficial quality when you're learning, especially when you're learning a language. I love when my students ask questions, when they're inquisitive, because it shows they're really trying to understand. And when you ask questions and you get those answers, you're able to form those connections in your brain and learn faster as well. So hopefully you are inquisitive when it comes to the English language. Fickle. Fickle. That's fun to say. Fickle. This means changing frequently, especially in one's loyalties, interests, or affections. For example, the fashion industry is known for its fickle trends. Trends in the fashion industry change very quickly, very frequently. One day, it could be very fashionable to wear a sweater like this, and then next week, they say that is the ugliest sweater ever and you shouldn't wear it. So they're very fickle about what's trendy and what's not trendy. The fashion industry could also be fickle about which designers they promote and support. Maybe one day this person is the designer that everyone's talking about, but then next week nobody's talking about that person and there's a totally new designer. So the fashion industry and many other industries is very fickle. Intrinsic. This means belonging naturally, and therefore it's an essential part. For example, an intrinsic motivation to succeed drives some athletes to push their limits. So they're not motivated by winning a trophy because that's an external motivation. The trophy is outside of them. They're motivated by something within, an intrinsic motivation. And just like I said that being inquisitive is important when you're learning a language, so is having an intrinsic motivation. If you're only motivated to study to pass the IELTS, well, that's an external motivation. And although it's great to have that motivation, generally it's not enough. Generally, we also need an intrinsic motivation to really push ourselves and succeed our full potential. Eminent. This means famous and respected within a specific profession or field. For example, she was awarded a prize for her eminent contributions to the field. The field being the area of her profession. So if she is a quantum mechanic, then that is her field. Quantum mechanics is her field. If she is a physicist, then that is her field, her area of study, interest, or profession. And here it said her eminent contributions. So it's implying that her contributions are famous or respected within that particular field, whether it be quantum mechanics or physics. Now you have the top 10 adjectives added to your vocabulary, but how well do you really know these adjectives? Let's find out with a quiz. Here are the questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play. So how'd you do with that quiz? Well, let's find out. Here are the answers. Hit pause, review them, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready to continue, hit play. Great job learning those adjectives. Now let's move on to advanced adverbs, again, followed by a quiz. Incessantly. This means without interruption or continuously. For example, the alarm kept ringing incessantly until she finally woke up. Of course, I could say the alarm kept ringing until she finally woke up. Adverbs are not required in a sentence. But when I say incessantly, you have this picture in your mind of this action happening non-stop, continuously. So all of a sudden, it sounds a lot more annoying or frustrating than without the adverb. The alarm kept ringing incessantly until she finally woke up. Inevitably. That's fun to say. Inevitably. This means certain to happen. So let's take an example with population growth. I could say, with the increasing population, traffic jams are inevitably becoming more common. Again, I could simply say traffic jams are becoming more common. But when I add inevitably, it emphasizes that, and you know that this is definitely going to happen. This is certain to happen. And of course, a traffic jam is when you are unable to move because there are cars all around you. A traffic jam, something that we inevitably deal with. Inordinately. This means excessively or unusually. For example, he was inordinately excited about his art exhibition. Of course, you expect someone to be excited about their art expedition or any sort of event or presentation. But if you say he was inordinately excited, all of a sudden, I don't think this is a good thing because it means there is too much excitement. The amount of excitement is not appropriate to the situation. So this is how adverbs are so valuable because they can really change the overall meaning of a sentence. He was inordinately excited about his upcoming art exhibition. And maybe you were inordinately upset about making a mistake in English. It's normal to make mistakes, but the amount of upset that you became was too much given the situation. Magnanimously. That's a long word, magnanimously. This means in a generous and forgiving way. For example, my old boss was magnanimously friendly after he found out I started my own company. So I was working for this company, but then I quit, I left, and I started my own company that's going to compete directly with the existing company. So you would expect that my boss, my previous boss, my old boss would be upset. But he was friendly. So I can say magnanimously friendly to show that he was friendly in a forgiving way. He wanted to show that he wasn't upset because I left and started my own company. Ostensibly. This means appearing as one thing when it is really something else. For example, he was ostensibly happy. So I know that he's appearing happy, but there's really something else. So in reality, he isn't happy. I know that because I said ostensibly happy. He was ostensibly happy about the news, but deep down, he was really worried. So he appeared happy, but in reality, he's worried. Deep down, that represents the feelings on the inside that we generally don't show to the public. Perpetually. This means constantly or continuously over a long period of time. For example, she's perpetually late. This is not a good thing because if you said she's late, well, that simply means she's late right now in this specific situation. But if I add the adverb perpetually, I know it means constantly, which is all the time. It's a reoccurring action, or continuously over a long period of time. She's perpetually late. Not a good thing. Precariously. This means dangerously or in an unstable way. For example, the hiker walked precariously along the edge of the cliff. So there's an edge of a cliff. That's already a dangerous situation. But if he's walking precariously, it means he's walking in an unstable way, so he's walking like this, or a dangerous way, he's extremely close to the edge of the cliff. Superfluously. This is also fun to say. Superfluously. This means in an unnecessary or excessive manner. So too much beyond what is needed. For example, the report was superfluously long. So reports can be long, but if you say it was superfluously long, it means unnecessarily long. They made one section of the report 10 pages when it could have easily been 1 page. So hopefully you don't think that this video is superfluously long, excessively long, too long than needed, wanted, or desired. Unanimously. Unanimously. This means with complete agreement of all parties involved. So everyone agrees with the same thing. They all agree yes, or they all agree no, or they all agree some other decision. For example, the board members unanimously approved the annual report. This means that every board member said, yes, I approve. They unanimously approved. Vehemently. Vehemently. This means in a strong and emotional way. For example, she vehemently opposed the idea of relocating to a new city. When you relocate, it means you permanently move from where you live now to a different location. So she opposed this idea. She didn't want to relocate. But if I say she vehemently opposed, you know it was with strong emotion. She feels very strongly that she doesn't want to move, to relocate. She vehemently opposed relocating to a new city. So now you have 10 advanced adverbs in your vocabulary to help you sound fluent and advanced at that C1 level. So let's find out how well you know these adverbs with a quiz. Here are the questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready to see the answers, hit play. So how'd you do with that quiz? Well, let's find out. Here are the answers. Hit pause, review them, and when you're ready to move on, hit play. You're doing so great, but you're not done yet. Native speakers love using phrases. We have casual phrases and we have advanced phrases. Now you'll learn 15 advanced phrases. One's take on something. This is simply another way to ask someone for their opinion or ideas. So if you're in a meeting, it's very common to say, what's your take on that? What's your take on that? And then that being whatever you're discussing, maybe a new idea, a new project, a new plan. And to reply, you could say, well, my take on it is, and then you simply state your opinion or your idea. We also sometimes will state our opinion or idea. For example, I think we should delay the project. And then we add, that's my take on it. That's my take on it. Number 2, to be in a position to. This is an expression that simply means to be able to or to be capable of. So you might say, we're not in a position to take on any new clients. At least that's my take on it. Or you might ask, is the company in a position to take on more debt? Is the company able to? Number 3, to be on the right track. I love this expression because it means you're making good progress on something specific. For example, you might say, we haven't solved the problem yet, but we're on the right track. So the problem still exists, but you're headed towards the solution. You're making good progress. You're on the right track. So if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll solve the problem. Number 4, to stem from. This is an excellent business or academic expression, and this means to be caused by or to come from. So you might read in an article, a lot of health problems stem from poor diet. So the health problems are caused by, stem from a poor diet. Said another way, you could say a poor diet causes health problems. But remember, we're switching them because we're using stem from, caused by. Number 5, to be a given. A given. This is something that is well known as an established fact or truth. So I might share my fact or truth. If you want to be a confident English speaker, you have to practice speaking. That's a given. It's just another way of saying that's a fact. At least that's my take on it. And said another way, I can say it's a given. To be a given that. It's a given that if you want to be a confident speaker, you need to practice speaking. Number 6, to take X into account. X is something, a noun, and that simply means to account for or to consider something. For example, when you're planning a vacation, you need to take exchange rates into account. The exchange rate, the time zone difference, the customs, the culture into account. Number 7, this is a good one, to grapple with. To grapple with. This is another way of saying to deal or cope with a difficult situation. So let's take a difficult situation. Social isolation during the pandemic. That's been very difficult. Many people are grappling with, they're dealing with, they're coping with the situation. Many people are grappling with isolation during the pandemic. Number 8, to be short on something. This simply means you don't have enough of something. For example, I'm short on time this week. Or I can't go on that vacation because I'm short on cash. I don't have enough. Number 9, to be up in the air. We use this expression to talk about a plan or an issue that's unsettled or unresolved or uncertain, up in the air. For example, my summer plans are up in the air. They're uncertain. I haven't planned them yet. Or I might say, the future of that business is up in the air. It's uncertain. Number 10, to bring someone up to speed. When you bring someone up to speed, you share the latest information with them. So let's say your colleague was on vacation and they get back and they could ask you, hey, can you bring me up to speed? Can you share the latest information? Can you bring me up to speed on the Jones project? So you could talk about a specific situation or just in general. Can you bring me up to speed? Number 11, this is a great one, a deal breaker. A deal breaker is something that causes you to abandon a plan or a commitment or a relationship. For example, I might be looking for a new job and I see one that looks really great, but then I get to the salary and it's way too low. That's a deal breaker. That causes me to abandon that plan, the plan to apply for that job. The salary is a deal breaker. We also use this a lot in relationships. You might say, she lied to me. That's a deal breaker. So you're going to end the relationship, you're going to abandon it because she lied. And that's a deal breaker. Number 12, a do-over. A do-over is another attempt to do something when your previous attempt was unsuccessful. So let's say you go to a job interview and it went terribly. You did really poorly. You could say, I wish I could have a do-over. I wish I could do the interview again. But unfortunately, most of the time we don't get do-overs. But you might be in a situation where you're in a class and the professor gave you a test and everybody did poorly on the test. So the professor might give the students a do-over. The professor gives the students a chance to do the test again because everyone did really poorly. Number 13, to come in handy. When something comes in handy, it's very useful. So this is a positive one. So let's say you're considering adding a new feature to a product you provide or a service, and you might say, oh, this new feature will really come in handy. It will come in handy. It will be useful. Number 14, to be a breeze. We describe something as a breeze when it's really easy. For example, learning English is a breeze, right? It's really easy. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on what your take on it is. Or I could say using Google Docs is a breeze. It's really easy. And then I could add using Google Docs is a breeze compared to MS Word. So in that case, I'm saying that Google Docs is easier than MS Word. And finally, number 15, to be spot on. When someone is spot on, they're 100% accurate or correct. For example, I could say the weather forecast this weekend was spot on. The meteorologist said it was going to rain on Saturday at 2 o'clock, and it rained on Saturday at 2 o'clock. He said it was going to be sunny and 25 on Sunday, and that's exactly what it was. The forecast was spot on. And now you have 50 new advanced expressions to sound fluent. Are you ready for your quiz? Feel free to go back, review the video again if you need, but if you're ready, let's complete your quiz. So here's how the quiz is going to work. You're going to see a sentence and you have to decide which expression best completes the sentence. I'll only give you a few seconds, so hit pause and take as much time as you need. So let's do this one together. Which option is it? A, B, or C? And the answer is A, bring someone up to speed. Now notice how I also completed the sentence. You can do that as well for additional practice to make sure you get the grammar correct. So those are the instructions. Now let's continue on with the next question. Congratulations on completing this advanced English masterclass. You did such a great job. Do you want me to make another masterclass for you? If you do, put yes, 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 put yes, yes, yes in the comments below. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And here's another lesson I know you'll love. Watch it now.